It's the Believe in Texans podcast brought to you by FanDuel. And if you find yourself coming back here often, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on Apple or Spotify or YouTube if that's where you're consuming this. And look, I want to go over the biggest storylines and headlines so far in OTAs, where there's a lot of meaningless noise, but there's also some really relevant things. In a large-scale view of things, the Texans offense has been getting a lot of glowing reviews from the coaches, the players. Will Anderson, I'll play a clip from him talking about how he thinks the offense has improved this year. Hasn't always looked on the field like they're going to come out and be a death squad, and yet at the same time, they're also going against one of the very best defenses in the league. So we'll see when the pads come on exactly how it looks, but there are some things systemically that have changed. Right now, the Texans, as they seem to be every year, have the over-under set at 9.5 on FanDuel. So if you're optimistic that the offense has improved and that the defense is going to be the same defense or better than they've been before, 9.5 has been, in the last few years since D'Amico got here, a really good number to take the over on. But if we start off with CJ Stroud, I mean, I could play you 29 different clips of coaches and players talking about CJ Stroud and how much different he looks this year. Here's D'Amico on the offense being ahead of where they were last year and on CJ specifically.
CJ's doing a great job all offseason. It's probably the first time he's had a full offseason. He's been dedicated to the work. He's doing a really great job of, first and foremost, just being here, being accountable, owning the reps, doing a great job of communicating with the staff, with the players. He's doing a great job of just taking more ownership of the offense. So I was just excited to see what this season entails for him, because he's having a really great start to it, being here in the offseason.
And that's really echoing what a lot of the other players have said in terms of his command of the entire offense. And I always look at it this way with quarterbacks. Leadership from a quarterback is not about giving speeches in the locker room. It's not about breaking everybody down at the end of practice. It's really about, first and foremost, competence and in directing the entire offense. So it's not just the quarterback playing independently and hoping that 10 other guys do their job. The really good quarterbacks and the guys who are veteran quarterbacks, it takes 3 or 4 years for guys to develop into this role where you're the conductor of the orchestra. And when things are going well pre-snap, and D'Amico's focused a lot on the pre-snap, the false starts, the illegal motions, things like that, and then simply having enough time on the play clock to get the adjustments made that you need to make. That all starts with a quarterback. It's really hard for young quarterbacks, especially in an offense like Nick Caley wants to run, where the quarterback has a lot of command at the line of scrimmage. You need time to do that. And that means everybody getting up to the line of scrimmage and doing everything properly, and the quarterback being the taskmaster that is accountable for all that stuff. And I think CJ, by all reports and by what he and everybody else is saying, has been doing just that. And that's evident at practice. You can see that. So sometimes, look, there aren't that many openings. There aren't that many wide open receivers out there. I don't freak out about that at this time of year, especially when it's an offense that is going to run the football and they want their run game to be tied to their passing game. You don't see the benefit of that in non-padded practices. The defense they're sitting on their heels, and they're trying to be honest and play the run versus play the pass and watch their keys. But it's just natural human nature when you're a defensive player. You're not going to get like the offense is incapable of blocking you well in the run game. So you try to be honest with your reads, but you know that what you don't want to do is get beat in the pass game. And so now if we get into the first couple of weeks of training camp and there's not more success, then I'll freak the hell out. We had Nick Caserio on Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610 in the morning, and we asked him about the fact that D'Amico had said it looked like the offense is light years ahead this year of where they were at this point in time last year. And Caserio agreed with D'Amico, but then unprompted brought up CJ Stroud and how impressed he's been with him.
Agree with D'Amico's assessment. I'd say overall as a team, we're probably further along this time of the year than we were last year collectively. Offensively, we certainly made a lot of strides and a lot of progress. Honestly, I think everything starts with CJ. It's probably been the best spring that he's had since he's been here. He's had a really good off season. He's trained well. I'd say his on-field demeanor, his presence, his communication, his ownership, his leadership of the offense. It's stood out. And I think collectively, just as an offense, seem like you're going into a year of understanding the terminology, understanding some of the nuances that are involved. And really, you're just trying to put the foundation here in place as a team. That's what.
And I think that with CJ, again, the competence part of it, I think the natural question or reaction people have to that sometimes is, well, what was he doing the last 2 years? I'll just go back to this is how it is with every single quarterback, whether you're Pat Mahomes or Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or anybody. Those first 3 years, it's a process of learning exactly what you need to focus on, how do you go about everything, and then just the mechanics and the reps of running the entire offense, where there's a lot more going on. Defenses disguise a lot better and more effectively in the NFL than they do in college. Last year, I was trying to be gentle because every time I would bring up that, okay, CJ's got a lot on his plate and it's not so quick or easy for a young quarterback to start doing all this stuff, people would say, well, hey, he did it in college, right? Yeah, he did it in college. And he was doing it in college behind an awesome offensive line that took care of a lot of issues that he didn't even know existed because they were so good. It's just never as easy for a quarterback to operate that way in the NFL. The other side of it too, just long term, someday we'll look back and hopefully reflect on this as, well, that was what the Texans wanted to do. I mean, this is the second time they've hired a first-year offensive coordinator to work with their young quarterback. And 100% I agree that, yes, sometimes young offensive coordinators end up being awesome right out of the chute. But if you look at a guy like Pat Mahomes or Tom Brady, Tom Brady had Charlie Weiss his first few years in the league. Peyton Manning had Tom Moore for his first 10 years in the league or more. Those guys, Pat Mahomes had Andy freaking Reid, as well as the offensive coordinators he was working with. They had, I think, more stability and just more experience from their offensive coordinators. So I've grudgingly gone along with it, but I don't like breaking in a new quarterback while also breaking in successive brand new offensive coordinators. We'll hear from Nick Caley out there at practice today. I'm optimistic he's going to be better this year than he was last year, but he, as an offensive coordinator, still has some things to prove. Second storyline, as by the way, on FanDuel, CJ Stroud is 3,550.5 passing yards for his over-under there. If you take last year, and if you think they're going to be any better in the passing game than they were last year, CJ played 13 and a half games before he got concussed in that Denver game. So not even 13 and a half games, but let's say 13 and a half games. If you extrapolate his passing yardage out to 17 games, that works out to 3,828 yards. So almost 300 yards more than his over-under, which is set at 3,550.5. If that intrigues you, FanDuel is the place to go. Tank Dell. So Tank Dell, we've heard nothing but positive reports about Tank Dell, but never with any specificity about how much he's actually going to practice. And first, I'm going to lay this out because I don't want to be a spoiler for some news that's just broken this morning. But when we had Caserio on Payne and Pendergast yesterday morning, Sean, my co-host, just asked him flat out, should we expect to see Tank Dell out at practice with the team instead of working out on the side at some point this season? And Caserio simply said, yes.
Yes. I would say more than likely it'll probably be in training camp. We have about, I don't know, however many days left here in the spring, but there's certain things that he's able to do. He's done some things on the field, maybe separately, kind of off to the side. I think the goal is training camp. So we'll kind of see if he stays on schedule. But, nobody's worked harder. Nobody's had a better attitude. Talking about a player that hasn't played football in, almost 18 months or however long it's been. But, his attitude, his approach, he's chomping at the bit, and he's certainly anxious and wants to be out there. By the same token, we want to make sure that we're taking care of him and doing the right things and putting him in a position where he can go out there and be the best version of himself. So I would say training camp seems like a reasonable time frame in terms of his availability in terms of next steps.
Okay, so Tank Dell was at practice today. Practice is actually going on right now as I record this. He was out doing individual drills with the team, and I don't think we should expect to see him in 11-on-11 or 7-on-7 drills today. I will update in the comments below if that is in fact the case, and that's really, really good news. Now, all the other questions about, well, what could he possibly look like? What's the ultimate end date? first and foremost, I'm really excited for Tank Dell. I think that just when we talk about needing more swarm type of players on the offense, Tank Dell has always been in that category. He is, I mean, it's almost impossible for him not to be, just because he's a tiny human being by football standards playing in the NFL and doing a really damn good job of it. His rookie year especially, we know in his second year, it wasn't as prolific, and as they're trying to work three really good receivers into the mix. We saw, unfortunately, in the final game in which he got injured, he was on pace to have the best game of his season in that game. And then he has this catastrophic knee injury. And every step along the way, I mean, it's rare to see a guy who's injured and out for a year or more to be as present and as involved with all of the activities that are going on. And he's been there and he's been doing that. So on a personal standpoint, just from my personal affection as a fan for Tank Dell, I'm excited that it looks like he's really going to get another opportunity to do it. And then I also know, between Tank Dell's work ethic, modern medicine, the time that they've given him and how careful they've been, I think there's a really good chance they figure out a way to get him involved this year. And I don't want to set a floor or a ceiling on what that might be, but just by virtue of having his speed out there, even if it's not a heavy dosage of it early on, he makes defenses tighten up a little bit. You know, Tank Dell on a jet sweep still affects the defense. Remember when the jet sweep was first all the rage back in, really was the late teens, basically the 2000 teens? Then defenses caught up to it. And now you see a guy go on a jet sweep motion or a jet motion and you think, all right, whatever. Unless it's a guy like Tank Dell, because he moves with such urgency and he's so fast, and you can see it affect the defense pre-snap. And then that deep threat and how it allows other things to open up underneath, that's there as well. And that's one thing that I think CJ is a better suited right now to take advantage of some of that underneath stuff, because those first 2 years, he was really hungry for the deep ball, and he kind of grit his teeth last year and accepted that, okay, I gotta be a quarterback who's willing to take the easy completion on first down, or if my first read is there, just take it. And he did a good job of that. I thought he matured a lot. So when you now have a more mature quarterback like CJ, who's got guys who can threaten deep, so sometimes it's Tank threatening deep, so Nico can come across the middle and vice versa. I'm excited about that possibility. And we'll just breathe, take our time, and don't put too many expectations on him. The third storyline that I think became a storyline only because of the colorful verbiage around it, and was Will Anderson just wrecking practice, and people talking over and over again, hey, you can't practice without Will out there. He's destroying everybody. I think some of that was done tongue-in-cheek, which is true. He's in the backfield all the time. The thing is, when a pass rusher comes clean on the quarterback in training camp, the play goes on, and CJ tries to be honest about it. The quarterback should be honest about, hey, don't hold on to the ball for 6 seconds in the pocket waiting for somebody to come open. But usually how you try to operate is, okay, it would have been a sack, but within the rhythm of the offense, did I have somebody open, and can I throw the ball to him? So that part of it doesn't really wreck practice. The other part of wrecking practice would be if a defensive player is actually just bull rushing, crashing into people, creating piles. Will doesn't do that. He practices responsibly. Just as you can practice safe sex, you can practice responsible football. And Will, I can't speak to the former, but definitely on the latter. I assume. I don't want to get in trouble here. I've heard. Let's see. The next one. Well, with Will Anderson, honestly, the fact that he wrecks practice is cool. That he's doing this in OTAs, which are completely voluntary, on a year after he signed a market-setting contract as a defensive end. That part's really cool. If you had any worries about Will Anderson getting complacent, that's not him. But also, this is Will Anderson talking about what he's seen from the offense so far.
I think you talk about CJ.
Well, specifically, he's talking about CJ and then the offense.
CJ has really taken that step, man, of watching the clock, getting the guys lined up, moving with urgency. But he's been the commander back there. He's taking that step as a leader back there to get everybody lined up, to, take the initiative, like, hey, man, like, let's go. And everybody's rallying behind him. And then you got guys like Wyatt Teller, who I love, man. He's been that energy booster on the O-line, getting guys moving around, picking guys up. So I'm excited about that group. I can just see the growth in them already, man. The offense is moving at a much faster pace. I think Caley is has been doing a good job. They got Foster with the tight ends. Dalton shows, as you know, man, those guys are rolling. It's competitive. And I laughed the other day. I said, man, it's going to be a fun training camp because you can see, like, the anticipation of everybody getting out there and, like, man, it's going to be one of those where it's going to be a battle every single day. Like, the physicality on the edges have up big time with Foster coming in as a tight end, like I said. So, like, all of those things that they've been working on, they've been doing a really good job at that.
Okay, so this is what I got excited about, just as Will, who walks around excited 24/7, but this is what he got me excited about. He's excited that there's going to be actual battles or challenges or competition from the offense. In his mind right now, this isn't going to be one of these boring training camps where they just go out and slay fools left and right all day long. That gets boring. And Will is a guy that I kind of look at him as like a young chess prodigy who gets disgusted with the level of competition that he's facing and seeing. Will somebody challenge me? Damn it. Do it. And it seems like he's excited for that. I love that he brought up Foster Moreau and physicality and after he's been going against him in non-padded OTAs. Didn't I just tell you guys that Will isn't going too hard or too physical? And yet I think he's found maybe a kindred spirit in Foster Moreau and a guy that can show a certain level of physicality and run blocking. And some of these things you can tell even without pads on. You can just kind of get a feel for the way a guy moves and whether he's sturdy or not. And Foster Moreau is a capable blocker. The dynamic of potentially having 3-10 tight ends out there a lot, that's something that's a trend in the NFL. Really being led by the LA Rams. Hey, where does Nick Caley come from? Oh, yeah, he comes from the Rams. The Rams last year used a boatload of 13 personnel when you've got 3 tight ends on the field. I think last year, Caley would have liked to have been able to do that. It's just all his tight ends got injured. So now this year, they draft Marlon Klein. They bring in Foster Moreau. They still have Brevin Jordan and Cade Stover and Dalton Schultz. It's 5 tight ends, and even by using Cade Stover at fullback some, you can kind of justify keeping 5 tight ends on a roster if you're going to be using 13 personnel a lot. Plus, Brevin Jordan is a guy that, hey, let's just call him a beefy slot receiver more so than he is a tight end. I think we're going to see a lot of that from the Texans this year, not just because it's a trend in the league. I think that Caley was there at the birthplace of this trend. And not to mention, he comes from New England before that, who was the team that really brought the 2 tight end sets into favor and vogue and did it really, really well. And he's a tight ends coach. Everything, all the stars are lining up. I've read the tea leaves. This isn't complicated math or anything. I think they're going to have a lot of tight ends out there this year as I adjust my lighting. But Will Anderson wrecking practice and maybe the positive appraisal of the offense all wrapped in to the Will Anderson dynamic. That's been talked about, chatted about, et cetera this year. The next storyline, and part of this, I think, is just because he spoke at training camp the other day. So there were a lot of quotes from Jayden Higgins. But Jayden Higgins and his emergence potentially this year as a bona fide number 2 to Nico Collins. And remember, Tank Dell's still in the mix. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves with that. But his improved body type so far, at least according to D'Amico Ryans, he's still kind of a gangly young guy to me, but D'Amico was very bullish on some of the changes he's made to his physique in the offseason. Here's D'Amico on Jayden Higgins.
Higgins has done an outstanding job. That's from day one, from him coming back. When I seen him for the first time coming back, it's like, well, you see a physical difference, right? You see a stronger, you see more chiseled out receiver. Then we step on the field, he's playing faster, he's playing stronger, he's making all of the tough catches. He's playing extremely fast. So he's taking advantage of his offseason, right? And he's really improved in a ton of areas. That was the first area for him, is just how can we play fast consistently? And he's doing that right now. So that he's going to have a great year. Can't wait to see it.
Yeah, and it's amazing, too, with young guys, how much faster they play when they actually know what they're doing. And they asked a lot of Jayden Higgins last year. They played him all over the place. It wasn't like, a lot of times young receivers in the NFL now, they want to get as much as possible out of them quickly, and they'll just really drastically simplify everything. And they didn't do that with Jayden Higgins, and he ended up, I think, in the second half of the season really starting to figure it out. One thing that Jayden Higgins brought up in his interviews was just now he really understands the importance of timing and rhythm in the offense. And he talked about, you always go into the offseason thinking, okay, I got to improve myself physically, which apparently he did, but also that I think he called it the intellectual side of the game, the timing, the rhythm, understanding where he fits in the offense, and doing all those things to where the quarterback really trusts you. So it's a matter of, it's not just good enough to get open. It's, you got to be exactly where the quarterback expects you to be when the quarterback's on the fifth step of his drop and he's turning to look for you. Because if you're not, man, it's kind of, you're pulling out the rug from underneath the quarterback. And this is something all young wide receivers go through. I think that Jayden Higgins showed that he could do it last year. And then with his physical improvements, I really think, man, for a kid who's as big as he is and still has room to grow even more, he does sink his hips really well in and out of his breaks. I think he demonstrates a lot of that body control that's unique to guys like Nico Collins. When you've got a guy who's 6'3" who can really sit down on routes, you know, if he's coming back on a hook or a curl, they just put on the brakes immediately. I think Jayden Higgins really has the potential to do that, and he's got a good mentor in Nico Collins right there. So the next one would be, and this is a little bit dipping into last week, which was the Nico Collins pay raise, which was news at the time. Not huge news. It's one of those things where, when we get news like that in the media, we think, oh, wow, this is big and notable. I have noticed that the fans tend to not really give a damn about it. And that's the smarter place to be, because the salary cap and everything else that goes into it, it's a problem if it becomes a problem. Now, the thing with giving guys pay raises, even if they deserve a pay raise, what fans or media do sometimes worry about is, hey, are you creating a precedent? You know, is this something that more guys all of a sudden are now going to expect and demand just because they see Nico Collins get paid? And I talked to Nick Caserio about this yesterday when we had him on our show. And I didn't even really have to ask him the question. We more had a conversation about it. It's a case-by-case basis that when it happens, it happens. Sometimes if a guy asks for a pay raise and he doesn't get one, if he's all put out about it, well, I don't know, maybe he wasn't the right guy for us. You know, the last time I can remember this being an issue was when Malik Collins got paid around about minicamp one year, and then Steven Nelson felt like he deserved a pay raise too. And that was when there ended up being some drama there with Steven Nelson and the team, and Steven Nelson took some shots at Nick Caserio on social media. Those are the situations you want to avoid, but it's also just kind of a cost of doing business where in the NFL. You're going to have disgruntled guys at any point on the season. And I can tell you all that with confidence because Steven Nelson divulged some of it on his podcast. So Steven Nelson's an entertaining guy to watch and listen to. It was just that there's guys that butt heads, and without even saying that Steven Nelson or Nick Caserio was in the wrong there, it's part of the messy side of life and business in the NFL. Usually, if you've got a good locker room and a good culture, you can handle at any given time 3 or 4 guys who are super disgruntled. Hopefully they're disgruntled but quiet about it, but guys are going to get disgruntled. You can't keep having somebody happy all the time. For Nico, I think, he was asked by Cody Stutes whether this was something he needed, did he need this pay raise, kind of asking whether, did you want to be traded if you weren't going to get this pay raise? Nico Collins answered thusly.
Something that I needed? Yeah, of course. You want to set your family up, for long term. We know this business, it's a business at the end of the day. It's definitely something that you work hard for. You come into this league to get extended, get contracts, So it's definitely a blessing. It's definitely motivation for me and this team to continue to chop wood, continue to keep going. But at the end of the day, I'm definitely blessed for that,
Yeah, and so did he need it? Okay, need is tricky whenever you're talking about extra millions of dollars. But when we talked to Caserio yesterday, Caserio used the word, I believe it was resolved. We were happy to get this resolved, or whatever verbiage he used. It sounded exactly like it wasn't like the Texans just out of the goodness of their heart approaching Nico and saying, here you go, here's more money. It was that his agent is Drew Rosenhaus, and remember there were rumors a few weeks ago about Nico Collins might get traded because he wants a contract adjustment. I don't think he was ever going to get traded, just as Nick Caserio said, but it seems the most logical that, Drew Rosenhaus had gone to the Texans and said, hey, we think Nico deserves a pay raise. And they went back and forth and they figured it out. And at the end of the day, it's a non-issue. The Texans right now have they've spent pretty aggressively. They're cash over cap spending. So the amount of money they're giving out that doesn't show up on the cap this year because they've extended it out and spread it out with voidable years, it's pretty high. Like I don't like using the term all in because sometimes there's too many connotations that go with, that we're all in, and if not, we got to tear it all apart. They haven't extended themselves out quite like that yet, but they've been pretty aggressive. And I think a lot of this is, hey, CJ Stroud is in he's in really the last super cheap year of his contract. They still have control of him, and he's still under contract for next year. But if, I think the way we put it the other day was, look, they're doing everything they can to surround CJ with a better environment. The defense is already Super Bowl caliber. And if all you got to do is go out and win a Super Bowl, and look, who was the last really good quarterback who ended up going out and winning a Super Bowl and not getting a huge contract out of it, if that's what the timing was? Joe Flacco was the all-time example of a guy that had decided not to take a pay raise, goes out, wins a freaking Super Bowl, then got a huge contract out of it. Somebody pointed out, I think Trent Dilfer was the last guy to win a Super Bowl as a quarterback, and then I think they let go of him the very next season. So that's that's a little bit like the Astros with their GM after winning the Super Bowl. But it's a rarity. It's the exception, not the rule. So thanks for watching or listening to the Believe in Texans podcast. Again, like and subscribe on YouTube. If you're on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, give a 5-star review and leave some nice words. I would really appreciate it. It helps other people find the show. And until then, everybody have a great one.